back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank everybody for sticking with me through my detail of our journey, but also the details of so many others' journeys as well. One of the really cool things that I've talked about on this app or on this podcast as well as on social media is my ability to be able to meet incredible people through events that we go to and just through this community, which is so incredibly strong. One event that I've talked about a lot is CureFest. Every year we go in September to DC, and every year it's gotten bigger. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the community and the strength of that community and the people that I've been able to meet, because they understand your story, they understand what you've gone through. It really is an incredible show of strength and coming together and showing what we can do. So one person that I had the honor of meeting several years ago, actually, we've gone 4 years now, was detailed their story, told us about their daughter and their mission and everything. And it's been really an incredible thing to kind of see grow in this community. So today my guest is Angie from Sara's Acts of Kindness. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Curtis.
And it's really been an honor, like I said, to meet so many incredible people. And I ran into you last year, correct? And it was crazy. This was probably one of the biggest years since we've been, and not anywhere to move or run, but it was incredible to see that many people coming together. At the same time, I guess maybe a little bit bittersweet that the community is continuing to grow, because it means we have an issue that we really need to fix. But I'd like to hear your story. Kind of tell us about yourself and how Sara's Acts of Kindness was born.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Sara was diagnosed with cancer in November of 2014, and she had, it was brain cancer, but she had like the good kind of brain cancer where there's like a 90% survival rate. And, like the plan was, we were going to do the steps, we were going to follow the path, and we were going to, cure her and then move on with our lives, and everything was going to be great. And, they kind of, you almost feel like it's presented that way, like it's going to be fine. You're going to have a little brain surgery, no big deal. And then you're going to have some chemo and some radiation, and, and then you're going to be great. And she wasn't great after she had all of those things. She had a major brain surgery. She had chemo, she had radiation to her brain. It affected her. Her tumor was on her pituitary. So after treatment, she had no hormones, which, teenage girl, she should have had a lot of hormones, and it made her very even keeled. She had to take all of her hormones kind of at scheduled times. And she was very good about taking her meds as scheduled. And so her hormones were always perfectly even, which is kind of weird for a teenage girl. And so she just, wasn't great. She had chronic migraines. She had POTS. She fell. She, just had a lot of pain and balance issues and stuff. And then she lost the eyesight in her right eye. And so we spent a week at Children's National after she lost the eyesight in her right eye. After she was in remission, she'd been in remission for, I think, almost 3 years at that point. And so they were watching this, and they were doing like MR angiograms, so MRAs, and they were checking the blood flow to the back of the eye, and, it was off. They couldn't tell, and they thought maybe she had something like a radiation-induced issue behind her eye. And so they were doing like hyperbaric oxygen treatments for that, hoping to restore some of her vision. And she was seeing a neuro-ophthalmologist who was checking the optic nerve, and they found a tiny tumor growing on her optic nerve behind her eye right before she turned 18. And so they biopsied that, and at that point, we were really hoping that it was a radiation-induced secondary cancer, which is, okay, first of all, how crazy is it that you're hoping for a different cancer, right? Like you're like, best case scenario is this is a different kind of cancer than what she had the first time, but it wasn't. It was the same cancer. It was a relapse of primary germinoma. Again, the good kind of brain cancer. And so she had a 6-millimeter tumor on her optic nerve, teeny tiny tumor. And they biopsied that, and, pure germinoma again. And so I will never forget the doctor coming in to talk to us about the biopsy results. And the doctor came in and he had a sad face. And I was like, oh, no. The look that they give you when they have sadness in their eyes, and you're like, great, this is not where we want this to go. And he was like, yeah, we're going to have to do this high dose chemotherapy. We're going to take her stem cells. We're going to use chemotherapy that's incompatible with life. And then we're going to give her stem cells back. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do 3 rounds of that. Okay. And so they had to do 3 rounds of like a lighter chemotherapy program prior to that to harvest the stem cells. And so we did that, and, you're kind of just following the path, like just doing the things. And, and then the first stem cell transplant is what ended up taking her life. So she, the stem cells engrafted into her lungs. She was ventilated, like it was September of 2018, she was put on a ventilator. And then in October of 2018, she was put on ECMO. The ECMO specialist said he thought he had seen kids with lungs that looked worse than Sarah's survive. And so he was like, yeah, well, we'll put on ECMO and we'll give her lungs a chance to heal. And they didn't. Her heart failed prior on Thanksgiving Day of 2018. She passed away from complications to treatment for a 6 millimeter tumor of the good kind of childhood brain cancer, which I would say that there is no good kind of childhood brain cancer in my experience. Nothing good about what happened.
No, I think that it's incredible to hear that's incredible. That's not the first time that I've heard the good kind. At least they have the good kind. And I don't understand where people get the disconnect between here and here to have to say something along those lines, or for that to ever even be a thing. Like, there's no good kind of cancer, or there's no good kind of treatment for it. And I don't understand. I don't know. It just baffles my mind, and I'm at a loss for words whenever I hear it, because to me, those are the people that have never seen it up close. You've never seen what it does to your child. You've never seen, the fear in their eyes, but you've never seen what the treatment does to them, and you've never seen it right there in front of your face. And so it's baffling to me. And I'm jumbling over words because I don't know how to really address something like that. JC had the swelling of the optic nerve in the beginning, and it was towards the end before they actually diagnosed her. That's what got us to the hospital right away when they saw that. And of course, my wife saw swelling optic nerve, Googled it, the worst damn thing you can do. And the first thing that pops up is brain tumor. It's not the stuff underneath it. It's the very first thing that pops up, and she freaked out. And of course, I said, nope, that's not it. That's not a chance in hell. That's not what it is. And unfortunately, that's what it was. And brain cancer, for anybody that doesn't understand, is the leading killer amongst pediatric cancers. It is the deadliest form of pediatric cancer, but the least understood, the least funded for research, and it's not something that is good on any level. If there is something that's not supposed to be there inside of your brain, that's a very delicate area, and a lot of times it's inoperable. I know with our daughter's relapse, it was inoperable because it was on the brainstem. There's nothing that you could do except treat it really, really aggressively, in a sense, with radiation. And radiation is a whole nother story. If you've never seen the mask that they have to wear and get strapped to a table, most people are put to sleep because you couldn't make me stay awake for that. And then the stem cell transplant, that's a whole nother situation too. I don't know that ours failed in that. She didn't end up with, graft versus host or anything like that. Like, it actually showed that it went well, but after the stem cell transplant, everything went downhill. And it's really kind of up in the air with that kind of stuff. But yeah, just to go back to it, I can't with the good kind. I can't do it. I don't understand it, and I never will. And I hope nobody has to understand what that truly means, because when you hear your child has cancer, if anybody says, but don't worry, it's only this, then they don't need to be anywhere near your kid.
Right? Yeah. And as a parent, our first instinct is, we're going to worry. Like, it doesn't matter how many people tell you don't worry, it's only this. We're going to worry. And that's, and that's our right as their parents is, I worry if they fall and scrape their knee. And I know that that's not, a big deal, and that every kid goes through it, but it still stinks, and I hate it for them, and I wish I could take that pain away. And that's just a tiny, tiny pain versus, having giant needles shoved into your chest and, having brain surgery. Like, there's just no comparison. There's no comparison to, a port placement in a teenager where they're tunneling underneath tissues and, and then they wake up after the port placement surgery, and that's super painful. It's all awful. It's brutal. It's horrifying. The whole thing is horrific.
Yeah, it's treatment in general for these kids. And I've said it before, I think that all of us as parents probably have, actually, no, there's no probably. We all have pictures on our phone because we document these journeys along the way. We all have pictures that we've never shown people. We all have pictures that will bring the strongest, most muscle-bound person to their knees. What these kids go through is absolute torture, and it's horrible. And the fact that we as parents are told when they're going through it, don't get any of that on you. Don't, if they throw up, if they get whatever, don't get any of the fluids on you because it has chemo in it. Well, what the hell is it doing to the inside of their body that on the outside that it's not good? What these kids go through is an absolute horror show, and I'm sorry, but there's no real good way to put it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's something that, unfortunately, I think the world needs to see more of for them to actually grasp how much of a problem this is. and how much of an issue it is that we don't have the treatments and therapies for these kids that would mirror what adults have options to. And that's kind of what I think we all are hoping for now. I mean, obviously, we hope the biggest thing is that we had our kids here with us. They're supposed to be here. We're not supposed to bury our children. That's not the way the world is supposed to work. We're not also supposed to watch them go through all of this as parents, because that's our one job, is to protect them. And this is a spot where we couldn't. So, for our kids, I know that they're watching over us. I know that they guide us in what we do, but they're supposed to be right here making all the mistakes that we've made as kids and continue to make as adults. They're supposed to be doing that stuff.
And they're supposed to have those experiences. They're supposed to experience the world the way you and I have gotten to experience the world. Like, we've gotten to drive a car. We've gotten to, graduate high school. We've gotten to fall in love. We've gotten to have children of our own. Like, we've gotten to do, you and I have got to do those things, but they didn't get to. JC and Sara did not get to do the things that they wanted to do and find out what brings them joy in adulthood. And, I think that's the part that is so hard. I'm watching, Sara was 18 when she died, and she died 6 years ago. She would be 25 this year. And I'm watching her friends get married, and I'm watching her friends have babies of their own. And, she didn't get to do those things, and she didn't get to go and be in her friends' weddings because she wasn't here. And JC's not getting to do the things that she should be doing. And you aren't getting to do the things that you should be doing, because unfortunately with pediatric cancer and pediatric cancer, advocacy, it winds up falling on the bereaved parents to deal with it. And the people who have lost the most are the ones who are working the hardest to help the next generation. And that's the part that's crazy, is that you and I have lost the most. We've lost our precious daughters. Like, we've lost the most. We have seen the worst of it. We've experienced the worst that there possibly could be. And it's time and time again, you and I are not outliers. We are the community, and we represent this community almost perfectly, because we are the parents who've lost what we shouldn't have ever lost. We should have, maybe lost a real good year, where our kid was sick for a year and they had some crappy things and, whatever. Like, I get it. Our kids had cancer. Like, it was going to be bad no matter what. They were going to have, 6 months to a year of just, crap. But at the end of the day, you and I have lost so much more, because we've lost the entire rest of our lives with them, and getting to see them grow up and getting to see them become who they were supposed to be. There's a lot, and I feel like after experiencing something like you and I did, parents kind of have two options. You can either pretend like it never happened because you don't want to, talk about it ever again. It's the worst thing that ever has happened to you, which I totally validate and is a totally understandable thing to do after something this horrific has happened to you. It's okay to say, you know what, I never want to talk about childhood cancer ever again. Or they do what we do, and we try to make a difference for somebody else. We try to fix it. We're like, oh my gosh, I've seen that this is a huge problem. I've seen that there's an issue here. And then we're like, all right, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm going to embrace it, and I'm going to stay the course, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to, even though it hurts, and even though it's hard, and even though it sucks, and, I have to relive the worst thing that's ever happened to me over and over again. Like, we just, those are like kind of our only two options, right? Like, you just have to do something. And, we've seen that there's this terrible, terrible thing, and children are dying, and nobody's doing anything. It winds up being on the bereaved parents. And that's what's really crazy. You don't see that in any other healthcare related issue.
No, I think that's the biggest thing that I think we notice here, is that we as parents, we as a community carry the entire load when it comes to awareness, advocacy, funding, everything. We were just recently, my wife and I were just in D.C. advocating on the Hill for bills that got cut last year and didn't make it quite through. And, leaving politics out of it, we were there to get everybody to sign on to it, to get to sign on to these bills for common sense. But the reality of it is, there were over 300 of us there in a room representing 40 states. We were there as parents, and so many in there don't have their kids anymore. And we're there as parents carrying this load and making these meetings and going in and begging for support and begging for funding and begging for research. And we shouldn't be doing this. And then there was a chart that came up, and it actually got me to the point that I was really getting angry, because they showed what in the past 7 years that there's been an increase of 3% in funding for childhood cancer, an increase of 3%. That's about a 0.5% a year. And people in some circles will celebrate that. And I say, that's crap. It's roughly 8%, a little bit over, depending on who you ask, right? That's garbage. That's absolute trash. And why are we celebrating that? Like, why are we? And the reason, and they will tell you flat out. A representative, a senator, or something like this said it a couple months ago and I think he said the quiet part out loud. He said, we're well aware that most funding for pediatric cancer comes from philanthropy. That's not where it should be coming from. Like, we love sending out care packages through our organization. That's all we should have to do to just bring joy to people. But yet for us to have to raise money in order to fund clinical trials and all this kind of stuff and fund research and do the research to find doctors and things that are willing to work with us, why are we as parents doing this? Why are we having to be forced to do this? Like, we elected people to do this for us. We hired people to do this for us. We shouldn't be the ones carrying the load. And it's really a shame that we're fighting for such a very, very small piece of the pie that should be even, at a minimum, should be even across the board. I mean, if you do just a little bit of a Google search, which is what most people do, you can find out that a lot of research for adult cancers comes from discoveries through pediatrics. So why are we then tailoring everything up for adults and going nowhere with kids? Like, you're treating them like tiny adults, and they're not tiny adults. They're tiny. They're growing.
Their bodies are still growing and developing. They're so different from adults. And if 8% was enough, then we would see those survival rates skyrocketing, right? I mean, I think that the proof is in the pudding, right? You can't say, oh, look at all that we're giving you if the survival rates aren't going up. If there's not new drugs being developed for these kids. If 8% were enough, then that would be great. I would love that. I would celebrate it if 8% were enough, if I saw a difference. But the truth is that the difference isn't there. Susan G. Komen, started the Go Pink movement for breast cancer, and the survival rates went up. You could see that funding was making a difference. If the funding is making a difference, then let the funding make a difference. Like, let's see it. But if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the facts to back that up, then it means nothing. Inflation is greater than that. Like, it's just a mess. And obviously, politics aside, children are bipartisan. Everybody has children. Democrats have children. Republicans have children. Independents have children. Everybody has children. Nobody wants their children to die. That is bipartisan. There shouldn't be, one side says, yes, save children, and the other side says no. Like, that's ridiculous. So, I think that it's frustrating because, you do see people celebrating. And yes, an increase in funding is an increase in funding. And somebody saying, yeah, I recognize that kids deserve more, even if it's not quite enough more. It's still, that's great, but let's see that number go up. Let's see that percentage go up. And yeah, kids aren't little adults. Their bodies are growing so fast. Chemo attacks fast-growing cells. And in an adult, like, that might just be your hair follicles and your cancer tumor. But in kids, that's literally everything. Everything is growing. And so, yeah, it's not the same at all.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. And, like, JC was diagnosed when she was 6 and went through it until she was 8. And those, as such a small body already with these children, with so many of these kids, such a small body already, and the stuff that you're putting into them, it can't handle it. Right? It cannot handle the types of things that are going in. And again, that whole don't get anything on you, God forbid, if you're going in for an x-ray, put on this metal skirt. I don't care about any of that stuff. As a parent, I didn't give a shit. As a parent, I didn't care when you came in and told me that stuff. I just wanted to be there for her and ensure that she was okay. And at the same time, my hands were tied, right? My hands were tied. The toolbox that the doctors had was very limited. As much as I would like to blame the doctors for not saving my daughter, it's the system, and it's the funding, and it's the research, and it's the whole thing behind it, that if they don't have the tools in order to treat your children, unfortunately, they're left with what they have, which is not a lot.
And it's not enough.
Exactly.
It's not enough.
And unfortunately, I think we learn more in this process of going through this journey than we ever want to know about this disease and about what it does and about the politics of it and about the funding and all of that. And we learn it all. And I had an argument one day with somebody, and I said, you know what? I'm smarter than a doctor. And I'll tell you why. not because I went to school for 7 years, not because I have an MD at the end of my name, but because I live this 24/7, 365, do not get to clock out at the end of the day. My daughter, my patient, has a name, not a number. I had to administer drugs, and I had to be there as a caregiver, and I had to be there to learn how to do everything in case of an emergency, all of this. So yes, do I think that I am? Yes, because I'm dedicated to that one person for the rest of my life, and I will ensure that they're okay, and nobody coming in with a medical license or a medical degree or an MD at the end of their name is going to tell me different, because us as parents, we know our kids better than anybody will ever know them, period.
We do. I will say that, I've been fortunate and I've been able to so I work in biomedical research. I don't know if you knew that my day job is biomedical research. And so I've gotten to meet researchers. I've gotten to meet a lot of people who do clinical hours and lab hours, and kind of have a combination where they're doing research in a lab, but also working with kids, and they're using, so they're able to do the clinical trials and see what's going on in an actual patient, and then apply that at the lab bench, which is super cool. And one of the things that I've noticed, and some of these people are, incredibly bright minds and from these very high backgrounds. And one of the things I've noticed is that they want to save these kids almost as much as we do as their parents. And, like unanimously, they're not in it for their own glory. They're not in it for their own, like, look at what I've done. It's literally like, I don't want to go to any more children's bedsides and say there's nothing more we can do. And that's the reality, is that that's a crappy conversation, no matter what side of the conversation you're on, as the parent or as the doctor or as the child receiving or hearing that kind of stuff. Like, it's scary and awful no matter what. Being able to, like, really develop these relationships, kind of after the fact, it is very interesting to see how much they genuinely care and want, because they don't want to have these conversations with parents ever. They're here for the children. And we've had delightful doctors. We had one doctor who came in with Sarah. Sarah, again, was a teenager, and he came in after his shift was over to play Rummy Cube with Sarah in the hospital bed. He saw Rummy Cube in our room, and he was like, I love that game. And so he came back after his shift was over to play with her, and just, awesome. We've just had awesome experiences with doctors. And I truly believe that they all would really prefer not to have to tell any other parents, like, yo, we got nothing. Like, the whole system is so messed up and so flawed. And I just don't understand why there isn't more attention from our government officials and from the press, even, that, hey, this is a serious issue, and children are dying. School bus loads of children are dying, and we should probably do something about that. It's not getting better.
It's absolutely getting worse. And I think, if we talk about statistics or numbers and things like that, when JC was diagnosed in 2020, I believe that the number of children was 43. That was the big number that you saw. And now it's 46 or 47 a day, depending on, again, the statistic that you look at. But it's going up, right? And we see, but then we get told that there's an 80% cure rate. Okay, that's all well and good too. But what about the 95% chance and in reality that there's going to be a reoccurrence or the growth of another cancer later on in life, or heart problems or lung problems from the treatments? Like, it's fun to talk about the good number, but not ever to talk about the reality behind it. And as much as I love some people in the politics side of it, and I love some people in the medical side of it that speak the truth, they are also guilty of kind of leaving out that bad number. And I get it. Right, I get it. That doesn't help your cause to talk about the bad number. But, you also have, you're considered cancer-free after 5 years. 5 years, for whatever reason, is the number that you're considered cancer-free. However, what happens after that 5 years? Does the number start over again? I mean, just because, we've unfortunately met so many people in this community that are doing so good and so good and so good, and then all of a sudden, the drop of a hat, shit comes back. They're relapsing. As parents and as people within this community that are close to so many of these, and we get these notifications and messages, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Like, everything looked good, everything was great, but that's the reality. That's the reality of this diagnosis, is that you never really truly know. I personally don't think there's any such thing as cancer-free. I just don't. because I
Yeah.
think that the relapse rate is so high on so many of these instances of cancer within pediatrics that to me, my biggest advice is don't ever take your foot off the gas.
Right.
Even if your child says, JC was NED too, and you get that sense of relief. And I feel like, yeah, we do calm down a little bit, and maybe you just kind of take your foot off the gas, but don't, and I've said it before too, and this isn't meant as a way to scare people or anything like that. My wife and I have been talking about this. I think that sometimes that, people that are in a position that have lost our child to this disease are sometimes in a better position mentally in some ways than people that have children that's still fighting, because we're not living on the edge of our seats anymore, right? And pins
We're
and
not in
needles.
fight or flight mode. Yeah.
Right. And I feel terrible because, I don't want to feel like that. And when JC passed, the word, I don't know, I'm trying to find the word and I can never find it. It's not relief. It's not relief. Relief is not the word when they pass, but at the same time, you're like, they don't have to go through this anymore. And they won their battle. Like the cancer didn't beat them. They won their battle because they're no longer fighting this. They're no longer going to doctor's appointments every day and needle sticks and MRIs and CTs and all the crap that they have to go through on a daily basis, when they should just be being kids and just doing the things that they want to do, and they're not. And that's the reality of this world. And I wish that commercials, I wish that's what the commercial showed, period. I'm sorry. I call them out on every podcast without saying their name. I wish that's what the commercial showed, is the day-to-day life of a child going through this is often not running down the hallway happy and smiling and excited to see your doctors. Because although, again, some of them can be very, very good. And, we formed relationships with oncologists that we had that were really good. I'm still in contact with ours even now. Still in contact with the hospital where JC was treated because they were good people. But at the same time, you're not happy to see them because of why you're there. You're happy to see them because they're good people, and it's a difference.
And you're also still hoping that they're going to be able to do something, right? When you're in that fight and you see them coming in, like you're like, oh my gosh, like what can we do? Like give me hope, give me a glimmer of hope, any hope that you like. I feel like when Sara was in the fight and and she was on ECMO for 7.5 weeks, and there were nurses who were like, I'm not going in that room anymore. They had fallen in love with her, and then they kind of felt hopeless, and which of course is a little contagious. So like, there were some doctors who were like, yeah, I still think Sara has a chance. And then there's like people who were like, absolutely, I cannot handle, seeing this kid go through this. And, as the parent, you're just on the edge of your seat, like, oh my gosh, give me hope. And so I think that there's some of that too, where you see these people coming in and you're like, please bring me something. What can we try? What can we do? Like, how do we get her back to normal? Like, you just want your kid back, and you just want them back the way they were. I think at some point I realized that I wasn't going to get my kid back the way she was. She was trached while on ECMO, and that was a nightmare of an experience. And, I was preparing for a life of taking care of her and keeping her happy and healthy and comfortable at home with a trach and a ventilator and stuff. And because we knew that there was going to be permanent damage to her lungs. And so after she died, it was probably a week after she died, I was at Costco, and there was a kid and the mom, and the kid was in a wheelchair, and he had a trach and he had a vent. And it was, the ventilator was on his back of his wheelchair. And I was looking at that kid and I was so jealous. And I'm sure that mom was like, why is this lady staring at my child? But I was so jealous because I would have given anything to be at Costco with Sara and her vent and her trach and all of it. I would have given anything for that. And I think that, at some, you start out with this like, oh, I just want them back the way they were. And then at some point you kind of embrace like, I just want them to come home no matter what. Like whatever we get, as long as they're in there, I'm willing to accept what it is. And, and then obviously the worst case scenario is where we are now. Like I would have taken anything. So yeah, I mean, I think that for me, after she died, I felt really, really bitter because I had planned for her to come home. I mean, we had a house with stairs, and we were going to put in one of those little like chairlift elevator things to get her up the stairs. And she and I had talked about it. Like she would, yes or no, like nod and shake her head for me. And so we had these like conversations when she would wake up. She was on a lot of sedation, and she was fairly immune to the sedation. So she would just wake up, and we would talk and talk and talk. And she would, I would ask her questions, and she would nod her head and stuff. And I was like, do you want me to put in a chairlift so you can come upstairs and watch TV with us? And she was like, because she had a first floor bedroom, and we had like planned for her to come home. And would have given anything for that to have been the reality.
Yeah. We, we plan for the best with all of this when you're going through it. And as parents, you fear the worst, but we're hoping for the best outcome no matter what. And there's no amount of taking care of our children at any level that we would not do in order to have them home with us and have them live out a life with us here at our, at home. And I know, and I don't know, and I've heard a lot of this, so maybe you can confirm too that I know that with JC, I mean, a lot of these kids, they feel bad that you're taking care of them, that your life has stopped essentially, that parents are fighting, that you're not being able to live your life. JC apologized to us all the time, even at 6, 7, 8 years old, was apologizing to us for having to take care of her. And the amount of times that we had to say, you don't have to do that. Your parents were happy to do this for you and to be there for you. And they care so much about us as kids. And I tell this story often, and it's very hard to get through all the time, but the way that they feel that they have to take care of us is so much a testament to who they are as people and what we're missing in this world. That the night that JC passed, it started with her having trouble breathing, and we had to put her oxygen on and all of that. And at that moment, I had to tell my wife, I said, go get her sisters, because I think this is it. And I looked at JC in the eyes, and at this point she couldn't speak because the disease had progressed and took her ability away to speak to us. So again, we were kind of with nods and things like that. And I looked at her and I said, are you okay? And she shook her head yes. I knew she wasn't. But at the same time, she was, because she knew that she was going to be okay now. And she was doing that for us, to tell us that she was okay. That's who these kids are, and that's why we fight so damn hard for them. And that's why we fight so hard, because to now, our mission and everything we do moving forward, we couldn't save JC. We do this now to save everybody else. That's our mission moving forward. And it's because of that's what I want people to see. That's the reality. That's the real moments in time that I want people to really see and understand, because that is who these kids are. You look at them as, well, we get that all the time when a kid's diagnosed, oh, well, they're kids, they'll bounce back. They're tough, they'll bounce back. No, you'll bounce back from a skinned knee or a broken arm. You're not going to bounce back from this. And to see the genuine hearts that these kids have at such young ages, and to look you in the eye and tell you they're okay when within hours they're going to pass. And I think they know that. I think they can feel it in their hearts, and they understand more than we give them credit for. And 100%. That's what we're missing. And so that's what I want people to truly see. I don't want you to see the dark moments, but at the same time, I do, because that's the reality of this disease. And to see things on TV or in the news or in the media that are very one-sided to make it look like this disease is okay and that it's under control, I think is our biggest detriment in this community, is because we're fighting against what the media believes is real.
And the portrayal is that they're cute. The portrayal is they're cute little bald heads with big smiles, and, that it's just a temporary thing, like, oh, they lose their hair and they're so adorable and they're pushing their little IV pole, but then, or riding in a wagon. But the reality is that there's blood, and you're their parent, and it's terrifying, and you have to suck it up, and you can't show them that you're scared, and you have to, like, as a parent, to have to calm your child down before a crazy surgery. When Sara was 14, she had brain surgery. She was old enough to understand what was happening to her, and everything had happened very quickly. And she was going, and she had not shown any fear or any negative emotions. She was protecting us. And the day that she had brain surgery, they gave her Versed in her IV, and it took down that wall. And so I was walking with her as they were wheeling her into the OR, and she looked over at me and she said, Mom, I'm scared. And I was like, oh, thank God, you're showing some actual, real, valid feelings that are, and I said, baby, of course you're scared. This is very scary. It's very normal to be scared before going in for surgery. It was her first time ever having surgery, and it's brain surgery. She had a craniotomy, and she came out with 3 plates and 9 screws in her head. Like, yeah, there's a reason to be afraid of that. And she was 14. She was old enough to know. And so, and I had signed the consent form saying that, I understood that one of the outcomes could be stroke, death, permanent brain damage, loss of hearing, like all of these horrible things. And, you're just like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll sign that for your kid, she finally had expressed like a real emotion. And then she said, is it gonna hurt? And I was like, baby, I don't know. I've never had a craniotomy before, but it may hurt afterwards. And it's just so telling that it like literally took medication to make that protective wall come down, where she even could brave talking about it. And she was, a little bit older than JC, and she was a little bit more, able to verbalize some of that stuff maybe, but like she also was really big on that protecting her parents situation. And it's hard, and it's normal for them to do that. I think that they also don't want to see their parents scared, because if it's one thing for them to be scared, but it's another thing for them to see us scared. I think that, it's like if they're scared of the dark and you come into their room at night and they're like, I'm scared of the dark. And you're like, yeah, the dark is really scary. This is a terrifying, like that's just going to make it worse. Like, no, you, as the parent, you go in and you're like, look, turn on the light. There's nothing here to be afraid of. Look under your bed. There's nothing in there. There's no monster in your closet. It's our job as parents to be brave and to be the ones who say, everything's fine, but then here's the situation that all of a sudden your kid's in, and you can't say everything's going to be fine. There's nothing to be afraid of. Like, no, there's something to be afraid of. This is scary. So I think that that's another thing that we don't see. We just see the cute. We see that they're adorable. Yes, children are adorable. They're precious and wonderful, and they're our whole hearts. But there's also a lot of scary, scary stuff that just is not shown. It's just not. And it's uncomfortable. It makes people uncomfortable. People who have not been there, who have not like seen their child just, bleeding everywhere. You can't fathom it until you're in it. And then once you're in it, you're like, oh, this is just another day. It's Tuesday, time for, my kid's trach to start bleeding everywhere, and the ECMO lines to start squirting blood everywhere. And it's the middle of the night, of course, because, when else is that stuff going to happen? So, you're dead asleep, and then all of a sudden every light is on and machines are going off, and nobody can fathom it until you're in it. It's not something that is normal, or, that a rational mind can even understand.
Right. And I think that uncomfortableness is what drives so many people away from actually paying attention to what we're doing. And so on one side of it, I look at it and say, okay, very genius marketing. Draw people in, right? Draw people in and make them think that everything's okay. However, I think that if we go to the opposite side of it and we look at the other commercial that features animals, is probably the reason, the way that they go at it, that we have 11 animals in our house, because you feel bad, right? You feel bad for what they're going through. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I would love the opportunity to actually speak to anybody from that organization at any moment, and not as a gotcha moment, but really just to kind of understand why it is that we don't show the realities. Because, we, like I said before, the pictures and images that we have, not only, on our devices, but in our heads of what we've seen, and that we'll never be able to get out of our psyches. That's always going to be there. Those are the images really that people need to understand and see. Those are what need to be done. Now, I'll be the first to say that JC had the most beautiful red hair that you've ever seen. And it was the first thing people would compliment. But we loved her little bald head. We loved her, the little peach fuzz that came back after chemo, because it was great. She hated that we rubbed it all the time, but but it was great. So I mean, you have to find a positive when you're going through all of this stuff. You have to find a silver lining, but at the same time, all of her hair fell out, except in the beginning for about 6 hairs that she would not let us cut for anything in the world, because she owned it. That was hers. That was what she was in control of. And that's how these kids take ownership of this, is that they control what they can control, and they just let the rest of it go to us as parents, and we do what we can for them. And I think that siblings are also some of the greatest forms of medicine on this planet. I think that they provide something that is getting more and more recognition. I notice it more and more every year when we're in DC. They get more recognition for the siblings, because they are truly vital in these children. Yes. Maybe not being cured per se, but feeling good, feeling normal, feeling better. And it's a supplement to medications that I think that, really should almost be, diagnosed, or should be prescribed by a doctor. Is you need 6 doses of hanging out with your sisters playing Barbies, because that's what's going to make you feel better. And it truly was proven for us. JC has 2 older sisters. One is 19 and in college, about to finish her first year, and the other is 16 and, has a job and driving and going to school, and she'll be a senior next year. And they were vital in her feeling good and her going through these treatments, because that's all she wanted to be around was her sisters. When she was in the hospital, she would FaceTime them, even when they were at school and couldn't answer, and they would just put their phones down and they would sit there in silence because she just wanted to be close to them. And I often say, too, that I think that it's harder as parents going through this that have older children when you lose a child, because not only are you feeling that your child is not going to get to experience life and experience all of this, but you're watching your other children experience those things, high school and boyfriends and girlfriends and jobs and all of that. And it's all bittersweet for me. Like, I love seeing the accomplishments, but at the same time I look at it and I say, but JC will never do that. And that drives me crazy. Even when she was on hospice care, and hospice can be very short, it can be very long. And, for us, it was, I believe, 11 days. And I remember going to a concert with our oldest while she was on hospice care and watching my daughter sing in the choir in her freshman year and watching the seniors graduate and sitting on the bleachers thinking to myself at that moment, JC will never do this. In my heart, I knew that. I knew there was nothing that was going to be able to change that. I just hoped that you'd have as much time as possible. That's the unfortunate side of all of the marketing that we see, is that you don't see the parents like us sitting behind the camera. You don't see the parents like us sitting on the bleachers that internally know exactly what's happening with our kids, that we've been told that fateful line, go home and make memories, because there's nothing more we can do. We're parents that have been pulled into a room with 6 or 7 doctors and nurses, almost like we're in the principal's office, or we're going to be investigated, and we're pulled in there, I guess, with hopes that we don't freak out and there's people as witnesses. I don't know, for them to pull it up on the computer and say, there's nothing more we can do here. And as parents, to be in that position, the outside world doesn't get to see that. And part of this message, or part of a podcast, part of social media, is our ability to kind of get that message out. But how do we take over the message that's been out there for so long? And how do we get people to realize that that's the real one? Like, I want pediatric cancer. I would love for all of our organizations to one day be the Susan G. Komen of pediatric cancer. I want the world to know what GOLD means, what it stands for. I want all of the professional sports teams that take on pink in October to do the same thing in September, but with gold, and know what it means. I want organizations to sell products where the money actually goes to research. I want all of this to happen at some point. And I would love to speak again. You know what? Susan G. Komen Foundation, reach out to me, because I would love to know how you did it. I want to know how you did it.
Yes,
and I would love to work together.
That is the model. That is the model. That is, like, here's the gold standard, if you will, of like, here's a foundation that worked it. And whatever it is that they did, the numbers back it. The numbers back it up. I mean, and at the end of the day, we just want to see these kids surviving. Like, it's stupid that 1 in 5 of the kids who are diagnosed with cancer are going to die. That's stupid. And the fact that the number of kids diagnosed is going up means that number 1 in 5 is also going up. Like, you've got more and more children dying. And no parent should have to have their kid on hospice. That's dumb. Hospice isn't for children. Hospice is for, old people. People who've lived their lives and who've seen, the completion of their life's mission and their goals, and not our children, not our babies. They haven't gotten the chance to do the things that they want to do and be who they were meant to be. Your daughter, my daughter, they were supposed to be somebody. And now we have to do it for them. We have to, make a difference on their behalf, because they're not here to do it for themselves anymore. And that's bullshit.
No, 100%. 100% it is. And there's no way that I could say it any better at this point. Like, our kids had goals. They had missions. They had lives ahead of them. They had things that they were supposed to do. JC wanted to be a NICU nurse. That was her dream. She loved babies. And her room is still set up the same way that it was the day that she passed. And it's got baby dolls in it, and she had a room makeover months before she passed, and it's all set up. That's what she wanted to do. What was Sara supposed to be?
So I think when she was younger, she wanted to be a writer. And then during her journey, she decided she wanted to be a child life specialist. But, if she hadn't have had cancer, I don't know that she would have thought about becoming a child life specialist, because I don't know that she would have known that that was a thing. So, I mean, if she would have survived and become a child life specialist because of it, that would have been really cool. But I think that she was 18. She was like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I just, I just want to not hurt every day and like,
Right.
walk.
Well, I'll tell you that number one, I never knew that child life specialists existed. I didn't know that it was a thing. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, meeting our first one on that admission day, and then throughout our journey, they're the greatest people I think in the world. And the reality of it is, we still stay in touch with ours, and they're incredible. We love them, and they make a difference in these kids' lives, and they don't get the recognition or the paycheck, by the way, that they deserve. And it's truly incredible what they do to dedicate their lives to these kids, and how they can be so connected to them and give them what they need in a moment when us as parents are kind of breaking down in the corner and not really knowing what to do. Our 16-year-old is going in to be a child life specialist. Like, she's decided that's what her career is going to be because of her sister. And I could not be more proud of that for her, because, as you know, right, kids, they want to be one thing today and one thing tomorrow. And she has stuck with this, and we're excited to see what she can achieve, because that, whether you're, a kid going through this or a parent going through it with your child, seeing all of them go into the medical field and go into those type of specialties because of what they've been through, you offer an incredible something to these kids and to these families that not everybody can, a connection that they can't connect to them with. And that's a piece of the puzzle that is just incredible. Yeah, that child life I don't think we could have a planet without them. I think they're the angels that just don't get spoken about, and
100%.
love all of them, and they've all been great.
I do too. It's a beautiful thing when they can really talk your kid through medical procedures. Like Sarah was like, "Is it gonna hurt after brain surgery?" I don't know. Like, you don't know. We've never been there, right? We don't know. But to have somebody who can talk them through these things that are scary. I remember somebody was talking Sarah through Angie tube placement. She was scared of having a tube go down her nose. And so we had a child life specialist come in and show her and let her touch it and see how flexible it is, and all of that. This is important, and it's stuff that we don't know. Like, I can't tell you what an NG tube placement feels like. As your parent, I can say, I'm going to hold your hand, or I'm going to be right here with you, or, whatever, but I can't tell her. There is such, a need for them, and there's such beautiful parts of this system to try to keep kids comfortable and feeling safe, and in a way that we as parents, can't. And no, I just love them. Both of Sarah's siblings are in college now. Sarah was the oldest, and Julie is a senior, and she wants to be a doctor. But at last check-in, she was a little bit nervous about pediatrics and was like, I don't know that pediatrics is for me, and which I totally get. She's seen a lot, and it's heartbreaking, and it's a hard area. And then Ava, her major is behavioral neurosciences, and she's very excited about that. She's a music teacher. I would love to see her go into music therapy, but she seems like she doesn't really want to do that. But they're both kind of in that field, and they've been around so much, so many scary things. But as siblings, you're right. They hold such an important piece of this puzzle for kids. Sarah, it really meant a lot to her when her friends would come and hang out with her, even if she couldn't do the same things that they were doing. She had friends that always made her feel included. That would come to the house and hang out with her and play board games. She loved games. So she was always down for, if you wanted to play cards or games or whatever, she loved that. And so, her friends were super important. I mean, she was a girl in high school. Like, they need their friends. Like, that's such an important piece of their like social development. And so, I'm so, so thankful for everybody that kind of rallied around her and like kept her feeling as normal as possible during just an awfully abnormal situation. Sarah, the principal of her high school, came and graduated her the day before she died. She did not wake up, but they did a graduation ceremony for her. And then when it was time for them to her actual graduation day, they had a chair set up for her, so in the alphabetical order where she should be, with a gown and, a flower and, all of the things. And they said her name, and there was a standing ovation when they called Sarah's name at her graduation, and all of her friends and all of their parents stood up for her. And it was such a meaningful and important moment, but that's not how we want to see our child graduate from high school. That's not it. Sarah's best friend, so she spoke at Sarah's funeral. Her mom was fighting breast cancer. While this child was speaking at Sarah's funeral, her mom died. She actually left directly from Sarah's funeral to go to the hospital, and she wasn't there. She didn't make it in time. Her mom passed away. And, this child is the most precious. And so that was Thanksgiving. And so in May, she graduated, or June, I guess. And at her graduation, on her cap, it said, "This is for Mom and Sarah," because she lost her mom and her best friend, like, within a week of each other. Just, like, it's crazy. And of course, we're still very close to this child. It's been 6 years, and she's still, I mean, she's mine. She's part of my family. She's part of my heart. But she said, "I think my mom wanted to go be with Sarah." She said, "I think my mom is taking care of Sarah in heaven." And just horrifying. Like, there's just no words for, like, what it's like to lose your child when they still had so many things that they still had to do.
Yeah.